Today we're going to be looking at air masses. Turn to your notes on air masses. An air mass is a body of air with the same characteristics throughout. That means the whole body of air is going to have the same characteristics, okay? What we're really talking about is temperature and humidity. Do you remember what humidity is? It's like how much moisture is in the air. Okay, so we're looking at temperature and humidity. I want you to look at this picture that you see here. I'm going to outline some of the air masses. So you'll notice it's just an area of air. Okay, and each of these little areas or bodies of air, the air is going to be the same throughout that area or that body of air. Okay, so I want you to know that inside of these, you see there's letters like an MP, MT, CP. Okay, each of these mean different things. Something that's really important, and I want you to write down, you should star it, so let's put some stars next to it because it's really important, is that air takes on the characteristics of the land or water below it. Air takes on the characteristics of the land or water below it. Okay, so if I'm looking here at these words, let's talk about these words and then we'll apply them to our picture here. So let's look at this word maritime. Maritime has to do with water. So what would you expect air above the water to be? Like, how would it feel? Yeah, it's definitely going to feel moist. Okay, so maritime has very moist air because it's located over the water. So if you look over here in this picture, okay, all of these air masses that have the letter M, they're all going to be found over the water. Okay, now we also have this word continental. Continental has to do with land. So what would you expect air over land to feel like? Yeah, it's going to feel very dry. So that would be like this air mass here, the CP and the CT. They're both on land. Okay, now we have these other words, polar and tropical. So let's look at polar. Where do you think polar air is coming from? The poles? Good. And what temperature would you expect it to be? Cold. Awesome. The last word we have is tropical. Where would we find tropical air? Yeah, near the equator. And this air would be hot because it's coming from the equator. Okay? So one thing we need to look at this picture that we see, one thing that's really, really important for us to recognize is where the equator is located on a map of the world, okay, or on a globe. Where would we typically find an equator? Correct, in the middle. However, if we look at this picture that we see here, the Earth is actually tilted. This is a different perspective. So it's almost like the Earth is tilted towards us, okay? So the equator in this picture of the Earth is actually not in the middle because the equator does not run through the United States. And what we see in the middle here is the United States, okay? So our equator is actually going to be at the bottom of this map. So I want you to take your pen or pencil and I want you to draw that equator in at the bottom of the map. And write the letter E next to it so that we know that that is our equator. Okay, let's look at some of these letters here. So now that we've broken down these words describe each of the air masses. So let's say right here I'm looking at MT. That means maritime tropical. So maritime tropical, maritime means moist, tropical means hot, okay? So you'll notice that it is over water. So the maritime, the M, it means this air mass is over water, so it's going to be moist. The T stands for tropical. That means it's going to be close to the equator, so it's going to be hot. So a maritime polar air mass would be moist and hot. Okay, let's take a different one. Let's take this one right here. CP. So C stands for continental. It means that it's over land. So this air is going to be dry because it's over land. P stands for polar. Here's our North Pole right here. So that means that this air mass is located close to a pole, so it's going to be cold. So a CP, a continental polar air mass, would be dry and cold. You ready to put this into practice? Okay. Here we have an air mass map. We're going to color code these since our air mass map is so small. So I want you to grab a yellow color, a red color, a blue color, and a purple color. So yellow, red, blue, purple. I'm going to go ahead and start with the yellow. I'm going to highlight this word maritime tropical in yellow. I'm going to take my red and I'm going to color this continental tropical red. I'm going to take my blue and I'm going to color maritime polar blue. And I'm going to take my purple and I'm going to color continental polar purple. Okay. First things first, let's look at this air mass map. The first thing I want you to look at and see is, where is the equator? Where would it be in this one? Good. It's going to be right along the center here. So I'm going to draw in my equator and write the letter E. At the top, I would have the North Pole. And at the bottom, I would have the South Pole. You can just cross out this description here. We're not going to use anything since we have the words at the top of our page. So I'm going to start here at letter G. And I'm going to ask myself, is letter G, is this air mass over water or land? It's over water. So because it's over water, I know it's going to be maritime. Okay? The second question I have to ask myself is it closer to the equator or closer to the poles? I can tell that this is closer to the equator, so it's going to be tropical. So my color for maritime tropical is yellow. So I'm going to take my yellow color and I'm just going to color the box yellow. Okay. I'm going to do one more with you. Let's look at letter E over here. Look at letter E. I'm going to ask myself, is letter E over land or is it over water? It's over land, so it would be continental. And is letter E closer to the equator or closer to the poles? It is closer to the poles, so it would be polar. So I'm going to find my color for continental polar, and it's purple. And I'm going to color that box in purple. I want you to pause the video and complete the rest. When you're done, you can unpause the video and check your answers. Okay, let's check our answers. Letter A, it's over water and it's close to the North Pole, so it would be maritime polar, so it should be blue. B is over water and closer to the equator, so it would be maritime tropical, it's going to be yellow. C is over land, and it's closer to the North Pole, so it would be continental polar, which is purple. D is over land and closer to the equator, so it would be continental tropical, which is red. Okay. F is close to the equator and over water, so it would be maritime tropical, which is yellow. H is over water, and it's also closer to the poles, so it would be maritime polar, which is blue. I is over land and close to the equator, so it's continental tropical, which is red. J is over water and closer to the poles, so that is maritime polar. K is over water and close to the equator, so it's maritime tropical. And L is over water and close to the equator, so it is also maritime.